Welcome to the latest episode of The Independent. I'm Pete Sampson, joined as always by my co-host Matt Fortuna. Matt, is March 6th. I just got back semi-recently from the unveiling of Mike Martin, Notre Dame's new GM. John Weigel, sort of their head of sports performance, Rob Hunt, the trainer, which is a sign that spring practice is around the corner. I think we're about 2 weeks away from that at this point. So, we got a lot of injury updates from Rob Hunt, which was incredibly helpful. And then Mike Martin, I don't think said anything that would have ticked off his former boss, unlike some other GMs who have moved schools in recent weeks.
Who could you possibly be talking about there?
Sure.
We'll have to get Dan Campbell on the podcast and get his true thoughts on the loss of Mike Martin to Notre Dame. But good to see you, Pete. Good to be in the spring mode. I know it hasn't started yet at Notre Dame. It's going to be now March 19th instead of March 18th. So 13 days out. And I mean, you touched on it just there. Rob Hunt touched on it greatly today. When your season goes till January 20th, which didn't really dawn on me how late that was till I saw those same players at the Senior Bowl and Combine, like in the immediate weeks after. It's like, oh yeah, spring ball's here. And you were seeing teams throughout the country get rid of spring games. I don't think it's because of tampering, as they're saying. I think it's because of the football calendar. That makes no sense whatsoever. Notre Dame will have a spring game. It's unclear exactly how they will allot their 15 permitted spring practices, but they did announce that it's starting on March 19th. The game will obviously be the 12th. And they might go a little bit after that, from our understanding. It's unclear right now, but you have the injury list. I don't want to make you go down the list one by one, but it's a lot of players. I use that injury term very liberally. But what's the biggest revelation, if you will, from what Rob Hunt said today? How do you think that changes the way things get run in the next couple of weeks when spring ball kicks off?
I think there were two specific ones. I would say actually there are three specific individuals that I think are notable, and then there's a group of players that's notable for like the change of the football calendar. And I thought the three specific ones were left tackle Anthony Knapp, limited spring, had ankle surgery after his injury in the Orange Bowl against Penn State. Will Pauling, the Wisconsin transfer, has a right fifth metatarsal modified for spring. To me, that's significant because, you know, the wide receiver quarterback, combination is important. Chemistry is important there. And Notre Dame needs help at wide receiver. And then Jalen Stroman, the safety from Virginia Tech, is out for spring with a right collarbone sort of surgical cleanup. Sounded like that was the injury he suffered in the opener against Vanderbilt with Virginia Tech last year that basically wiped out his season and allowed for this transfer to even happen. So those are three individuals. And then there's like a group of players who I'm not going to remember all of them, even though I haven't written down, Josh Burnham, Bryce Young, Drake Bowen, Christian Gray, Adon Schuler, Jeremiah Love, Jaden Greathouse, Emil Wagner, Leonard Moore. I'm probably leaving out a couple. Basically guys that played a ton of football last year and don't need to go through spring practice full bore. So that in the press conference today, there was some light shed on, hey, this is how you adapt to a 16-game season. This is how we're trying to manage injury prevention, and an acknowledgement that, we always talk about what college football and the NFL football get closer and closer together. Well, this is actually another one of those ways where spring practice is like mini camp OTA type stuff, opposed to in the past, I think with winter workouts and spring football, it was treated as like, this is where you build mental toughness. This is where you really had to grind the guys, and like you're puking in trash cans, and like even back to Matt Bayless with a Valentine's Day lift, and I think they had like a St. Patrick's Day lift, like just absolutely destroying the guys in the weight room. Like we're at a point with college football where it's work smarter, not harder. And not giving Jeremiah Love a lot of carries during spring practice is work smarter, not harder.
It's funny. North Carolina kicked off their spring ball this week. They've been in the news because of their head coach. And hearing Bill Belichick speak yesterday, he almost had the opposite approach to it, just coming from the NFL. He's like, this is great. We get to put pads on and tackle. Yeah. Like they're unions in the NFL and they're, OTAs, and we can't hit and run them into the ground like we want to here. Like, let's just go play football. Which, when you're taking over a program, it's a little bit different philosophy than when you're coming off a national championship game appearance. But yeah, I mean, Michael Floyd's big punishment was missing spring ball his senior year. Like, remember that one? I mean,
oh yeah,
pretty significant. You mentioned Jeremiah Love a couple times. I'm curious, did we ever get any? Like, it was a fairly significant injury. You could tell just by watching him play, but like, what the exact injury was with his knee?
I was told it was an MCL injury.
Okay.
Rob Hunt didn't say that explicitly today, but he was asked, like, did they ever think about surgery for it? He said no. And that really the key for getting him back was just time off, and they had basically 3.5 weeks between USC and Indiana, and he felt like if he hadn't re-aggravated it against Georgia, we maybe would have seen a different Jeremiah Love against Penn State and Ohio State. But once the re-aggravation happened, they didn't have the time off to heal him up. Also, for the sake of conspiracy theorists, CJ Carr totally fine, full participant in spring practice. So if you're kind of one of those people who have been Zapruder filming CJ Carr's warmups, you can stop doing that. Sounds like he's totally fine, full participant in spring ball. I guess one other individual, Boubacar Traore, who I think is good enough to have a NFL draft decision to make a year from now, will be full go by summer, but limited during spring ball.
That would make sense. I mean, there's always a lot of non-football talk in the offseason throughout the college football landscape. And obviously the last couple of weeks, playoff meetings, are they going to 14 teams? Are they going to 16 teams? And the feedback I keep getting from like athletic directors is like, okay, the more the merrier. How's that going to work? Like, we literally just had the season end January 20th. Like,
yeah,
what are we going into February now? Are we going up against the NFL? Are we making week 0 a week 1 now? Like, how do you squeeze in all of these games? I mean, we could talk about buys, but the 4 teams that had buys last year all lost in the first round. I mean, it's a small sample size, but I think right now is the crunch where you really see, again, like seeing Riley Leonard go to the Senior Bowl and the Combine right after we saw him literally puking on the field against Ohio State weeks before. That's when, and then, oh, by the way, your teammates are now getting ready for spring. The condensed calendar is not very forgiving to teams that are actually good at football and make long playoff runs. And something needs to be done to put this toothpaste back in the bottle, so to speak. I mean, the spring transfer portal window opening post spring again. We'll see about quarterback with Notre Dame. Like, I don't anticipate any dramatic transfers, but even when the offense lineman who left right after the title game, it felt almost raw because they really didn't have a choice but to make that decision as quick as they did. And I just think the calendar right now is so out of whack that the powers that be need to figure that out before they get to expand the playoff or automatic bids or whatever else is on their agenda.
It's interesting. Earlier this week, I spent about an hour with Jack Kaiser. He'll be on The Athletic next week. But we talked about a bunch of stuff. But one of them was like when he went to the Combine, there's so much medical testing. He spent like 10 hours at the hospital, like with, an MRI and X-ray after X-ray after X-ray. And he made the point, it's like, look, my body just held up for a 17-game season. So I've answered the durability question in a way that few players are able to. Could he run the 40 and do all the other stuff that pro teams might want? No, but I don't know what's better than tape against Georgia, Penn State, Ohio State. If you're if you want to see what a linebacker projects as the next level, have him play against the next level talent, which is what the playoff afforded to him. But on the point of the season coming to a very abrupt end, he said that once they got back to campus after the game, he went to swipe to go into the Goog and his card had been deactivated. Like, it was just like the season was over. Like you were, you were alumni status at that point.
It's like the Jets meme from Hard Knocks. Where he gets cut.
And he said he felt bad for, like, if you were Rocco, he didn't mention Rocco Spindler or Pat Coogan by name, but like, you may never ever come back to the Goog. Maybe not ever, but like, once the season's done, boom, you got to move on to the next thing. And in some ways, I think that's the harder transition than guys going pro. It's like you reference, like guys going to their next school, because man, that is a tough adjustment. And I think, to kind of get back, like for Notre Dame guys, to get back to something that came up in the press conference today, like for the first time, they sort of tiered winter workouts, where like the first group that went was mid-year enrollees and transfers, and then it was like guys on the roster who played a little, and then it was like your Jeremiah Love, Jaden Greathouse types at the end. So it's just a different world of college football now, where you have to measure the tread on the tire multiple times per year and make sure you don't wear them out any sooner than you have to.
No, and it was interesting hearing you relay Jack Kaiser's thoughts on game tape. Like, I felt like the winner of the combine, just from everything I read out there, was Tyler Shuck, the Louisville quarterback, because it was like, wait a minute, it's a weak quarterback class. We have a 25-year-old here who's played more football than anyone. Like, he's more of a like, when you look at quarterbacks who struggle lately, who are high picks, it's the Anthony Richardsons of the world, the guys who started only 10, 12, 13 games in their career and are still very raw. I think there's room for guys who played football. This is a great segue into tipping our cap to the recently retired Zack Martin, because he was the most consistently great college football player, I think, from like the start of his career to the end, that I may have covered. And I remember banging the drum. Actually, funny enough, and this is going to be a duh, Matt thing, but I was saying it before everyone knew it was obvious. The two best players I think I covered in college football, or saw up close in college football in 2013, were Zack Martin and Aaron Donald. And I don't think either of them had any real preseason draft or pre-draft hype. They both ended up being first-round picks. I'd have to go back and see who else was drafted, but those are two Hall of Famers. I don't know how many other Hall of Famers came out of that draft. And seeing Zack Martin announce his retirement this past week, and seeing it reported earlier, whether it was dealing with us, whether it was just being the guy when they were going 8-5 and being the guy when they're going 12-0, one of the best leaders / football players I think either of us have ever covered. And like, it may have been a surprise to anyone, because I don't think, unless you're around them every day, you're studying specific offensive linemen that closely. But I was not the least bit surprised he went on to have the career he had. I mean, he was the model of reliability at Notre Dame, and he went on to be the same thing in Dallas. And oh, by the way, he closed his career with a Bowl MVP award, which I don't think has ever happened. Definitely not in our lifetimes. But I think you got to go back to like the 50s or 40s, before the forward pass, maybe, when an offensive lineman won a bowl game MVP on it.
Leon Hart. Pinstripe Bowl MVP Zack Martin is always my favorite way to refer to him. But like, just like to clue you in on like what a good guy Zack Martin was from a media point of view, back in, I guess it would have been 2009, when I was at Irish Illustrated, every week I would have to put together sort of a preview compilation of like who the commits were playing that week. Here's the opponent, here's how their season's going. And I usually would try to get one or two commits on the phone. Even back then, it was difficult to get high school kids to answer your phone. Without fail, Zack Martin picked up when I called. And so I'd be talking to him about his game against, I don't know, like Bishop Dwenger in Fort Wayne, or like he played at Chittard. So maybe they're playing Roncalli or something. Like it, he was an awesome guy to deal with, from high school through college. I'm assuming in the pros too. If you have not read his Players Tribune story, I strongly encourage you to. If you're a Notre Dame fan, you will laugh out loud at multiple points, because there's a lot of like apartment living with Tommy Rees in there, and some Harry Heastand stuff too. So check that out. But he was a great guy. And I think, Matt, you did a television spot like the best offensive line of the BK Marcus Freeman era. And you had one, which I wrote down the exact same one. I feel like we should have done a draft of offensive linemen to see which, and then we could maybe have Chris Watt, who would be biased because he'd be on one of our squads. But like, I mean, Zack Martin is a first ballot Hall of Famer, and he might not have the highest like ceiling of all the offensive linemen I covered, but I don't know how you could argue he hasn't had the best career.
It's funny. I remember when he got drafted, and even I don't remember how long ago after, there was a big ESPN story on Jerry Jones, and it was like in the war room with him, and they had to basically like physically restrain him from like pressing the button to draft Johnny Football, and was still so mad they drafted Zack Martin. And I can't think of two more opposite people, football players, you'd have it, than Zack Martin and Johnny Manziel. And obviously we saw the way things worked out. Well, only one of them got a Netflix documentary, and it wasn't for the better. One of them's going to get a gold jacket. So that's kind of the Cowboys in a nutshell in our lifetimes. But just the embodiment of consistency, just a phenomenal career, and happy he can go out on his own terms. You mentioned the Players Tribune article. He tweeted his announcement by saying, "I'll miss the lights." And my favorite sports movie is Friday Night Lights, and that's the last line. They say, "I'll miss the lights, I'll miss the heat. You'd be perfect." So just a awesome way to go out. And yeah, I was asked a week or two ago on CHSN when the news first broke to make an all Notre Dame offense line that I've covered from BK and Marcus Freeman. I came up with two full teams. I still have very good players that did not make it. And we had to use a little bit of creative accounting to get all these guys in position wise. I think you said you had the same one as me, but my first team was from left to right: Ronnie Stanley, Quentin Nelson, Nick Martin, Zack Martin, Mike McGlinchey.
Yeah, that's my first team too.
I got asked, is that the best offensive line in the NFL right now if they took the field today? And considering 4 of those 5 were top 16 draft picks, I would say probably. However, the highest drafted among them, Joe Alt, is a second teamer. He was number 5.
And you could make an argument that he wouldn't make the second team, which is crazy.
It's interesting. I solicited a couple of guys we had covered who played on these lines. I don't think any of whom I actually put on here, but there was definitely a torn McGlinchey versus Alt on that first team feedback. Because I think when it's all said and done, because I took both college and pro careers into account, it's hard to imagine a number 5 pick who's being coached by Jim Harbaugh will ultimately find his way onto that first team.
Yes. But I think it's there hasn't been enough tape, right?
If you read the NFL reports out there, the Ravens are going to let Ronnie Stanley walk, which, okay, good luck. My second team, for what it's worth, left tackle, left to right: Joe Alt, Aaron Banks, Sam Mustipher, Chris Watt, Liam Eichenberg. That means Jared Patterson, Robert Hainsey did not make it. Tommy Kramer did not make it, I believe. Actually, no, Kramer, Eichenberg. One of them was a consensus All-American in 2020. Probably Eichenberg. I need to look that back up. I remember I was doing my research.
You could make an argument for Alex Bars in there.
Yeah.
On the interior, it's
Braxton Cave, get center, second team center.
Could be. It's I enjoyed his teammates making fun of him for his Tyrannosaurus arms, which is how you end up playing center. But and look, guys from this group now it wouldn't shock me if we were talking about Charles Jagusah down the road.
Kirby Lambert,
Billy Shrout down the road. It's been an incredible. I wish I should have the stat memorized or at least on a sticky note on my computer, but the number of games Notre Dame played without a eventual first round pick at left tackle from Brian Kelly through Marcus Freeman. There was a Liam Eichenberg stretch, but dang, he was only a second round pick. And then, last year, obviously, Anthony Knapp, way too soon to tell. But I do think if Charles Jagusah had started the entire year, we would just be yep, he's the next one. So it's an incredible run of offensive line talent. There's a reason why Rocco Spindler and Pat Coogan, who both played well and very gutsy last season, were essentially kind of well, we don't have a spot for you. And almost every Power 5 school in the country was probably we sure as hell have a spot for you. Because
it's got to be the hardest. It is the hardest in the portal to go again.
Yeah.
Notre Dame did it once. It didn't really work out.
Notre Dame is so fortunate that they will never, they did Kane Madden a few years ago. It worked out how it worked out. They pretty much should never have to go into the portal again for offensive linemen. And that is the most important position that you don't have to go into the portal to because it does not work.
And even the guys who have left, and I don't think it was a mistake to leave, they left because of a numbers game. Quinn Carroll at Minnesota, the redhead at Florida State with the beard.
Why
am I forgetting his name? He was good.
Dylan Gibbons.
Yes. Apologies, Dylan Gibbons. Good. These guys all had good careers for themselves elsewhere too.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty crazy to think about.
Yeah, because how many other positions has Notre Dame lost a guy and we never hear from again? When Notre Dame loses an offensive lineman, they become a starter at the Power 4 level. This is how it works out.
They've got, I think they've got their 5 for spring and for next. Well, maybe not for spring because of injuries, but for next year. Seeing if there's any movement in fall camp the way there was last year's fall camp will be interesting. Can a Gerby Lambert sneak in there and steal a starting spot? I would put Jagasaw at left tackle. I assume that's how it's going to go, and keep Wagner at right. But Jagasaw was the highest graded lineman, I think, in that Penn State game, and he was at right guard. And it was the first football he played since the Sun Bowl, if I'm not mistaken, at least on the offensive line. So they've got a lot of good problems to figure out up front. I don't know what kind of answers you'll get in the spring, given the numbers issues here, but it's going to be exciting to see, the conversation we have about these guys 6 months from now.
Yeah, it's like I wrote a story a couple weeks ago, talked to Mike Golick, Jr., friend of the show, and Cole Kublik just about Notre Dame's offensive line, because it's I feel like we're at a spot now with that group. It's not a question of whether they're going to be really good. It's whether they're going to be Joe Moore Award good. And Anthony Epps limited for spring, Billy Schrouth limited for spring, Ashton Craig out for spring. It's not like they don't have questions to answer, but when August rolls around, if they're healthy from the start of August through the end of December / midway through January, that will be a great offensive line. I don't know who fits where. Golick was adamant that Jagasaw stay at left tackle opposed to kicking inside, which means Anthony Knapp probably has to move. I don't know what that means for Gerby Lambert, but it should be a explosive group. And a lot of credit to Joe Rudolph for the job he did last year. He was able to get something out of a line that was never the line that he intended to get something out of from the first day of camp on. So that's going to be, you're going from the biggest question to the biggest strength.
That's what I'm saying. It was the biggest. When Jagasaw went down, we were all like, "Oh crap, he was indispensable."
Even though he barely played, he was the indispensable one-game starter.
That was the state of things as far as proven goods going into last year. I do think, and it won't be the same this year. Riley Leonard deserves a ton of credit for that. Just having a quarterback who's that mobile and can get out of trouble and is a veteran. I don't think Steve Angeli, Kenny Minchey, Kenny Minchey's got the wheels, but or CJ Carr, will have that kind of it factor, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But they will be playing behind bigger, stronger, better offensive line, at least from day one.
Yeah, I mean, we even left out Sam Pendleton leaving for Tennessee. Again, you're back up at Notre Dame. You're a Power 4 starter somewhere else right away. That is an incredible, incredible transition for these offensive linemen. It's just don't start here. I'm going to go start there. And the way NIL is, it's an expensive proposition for you to get me to come to your school too. So more power to these guys.
We've made it this far without talking about quarterbacks as we preview spring ball. And this didn't dawn on me till today when I was going back. I would argue, and you could split hairs and say some of these were more legit than not. I would argue this is the first year since 2016 where we're going in not knowing who's going to be the week 1 starter, or not having an 80% inkling of who it's going to be.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I was trying to think back about when the last full blown quarterback competition is, because I wouldn't count Jack Cohn, Drew Pine.
No, none of the transfers count. I wouldn't count. Buckner was always going to be Pine. That was the way it was set up.
Yeah,
it was the Kaiser Zaire one, which was a disaster, but
hottest of the hot messes. You could behind the scenes, I think there was sort of a Wimbush book one in 2018 but it was just in a we're going to have Wimbush beat Michigan and then we'll see where it goes.
I mean, that's the one where you're he's not going to lose his job before the season.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't keep his job, we're going to leave him. But it wasn't, again, there's nothing Ian Book could have done to start week 1 that year.
No. And there's a big difference between that and the Kaiser Zaire Golson's Zaire. Remember that one? Just like a full blown quarterback competition where you're like,
but even
ugh.
Golson was gone after the spring.
Yeah, it was a springtime only, and that's like Marcus. I think we've hopefully matured as a society where we don't have to like analyze every rep all the time, and we're not going to see very much of spring practice anyway. So maybe there's less to analyze. But if you were hoping for a resolution of this quarterback competition by the spring game, you're probably gonna have to wait until mid-August on that, and that's totally fine. It's just like that's where college football is today. It's not the whole like having a guy lead the team for the entire offseason. While important, I think probably the biggest important thing for Notre Dame is that Steve Angeli does not go anywhere.
I was gonna say, like, I think he could lead this team right now. Like, now, does that mean he's the starting quarterback / the guy who's going to bring him to the playoff next year? I don't know, but like, I think he was pretty close to being a captain last year. I'll go to my grave saying they don't beat Penn State without him and that drive, which is not easy to do at the second quarter before halftime, which is not easy to do when you really haven't played all year and you get called into action in a borderline disaster situation. I'm not worried. Like, again, if Carr runs circles around him in the spring and it becomes very clear he's not going to be the guy, he's got to do what's best for him and get out of there. But I'm not like, I don't approach this one as like, well, we got to be delicate with this because we might lose him or, he's earned it. No, I think you know what you got from a mental standpoint, from a locker room standpoint with Steve Angeli.
Yeah, it's not. I think Buckner Hartman would be the closest one where you're sort of the last example of well, can we keep both of them around? We're going to try to massage this. And like, even if everyone knows who's going to be the guy, like let's pretend like it's not. I think you can have an honest competition. And if Carr wins it, great. But I don't think Angeli would be like, I was duped. And I was like, this is, when I sat down with Jack Kaiser, I asked like, hey, who are the captains next year? And the first name he mentioned was Steve Angeli. And I was like, what? And you mentioned him like being close to a captain last year. I don't think that's far off. And Kaiser mentioned a few other names, like he had defensive guys, a bunch jumped out. Some of them surprised me, like, Donovan Heinisch, maybe, who's not a starter per se, but he was like, the one guy who I am fully on board with is Steve Angeli as a captain. And like, as we all know, if you're going to be a captain, you got to play. That's how that process works. So I think it was the kind of one of the first times like, well, okay, maybe the competition is like a full on the best man win opposed to we got to grease the skids for the high profile redshirt freshman who, everyone's been sort of waiting on pins and needles for since he showed up.
Yeah. I mean, I went on this week to CHSN, talk about the quarterback battle, and I had a couple people saying like, you never mentioned Kenny Minchey. And I feel kind of bad because I don't think anyone mentions Kenny Minchey. He was a late addition to that recruiting class. He's kind of been lost in the shuffle, so to speak. I really don't have a whole lot of intel on him. And everything I do hear is it's Angeli or Carr. But I haven't heard anything good or bad about Kenny Minchey. I was surprised they came out of last spring with everyone still on that roster in that quarterback room. I do like, they're obviously not going to the portal. I don't think they're worried about numbers if they do lose someone, because like Tyler Buckner is back and he can like be an emergency body in that room as a fourth stringer, I guess, or maybe third stringer. Given his class standing, but
and you've got Blake Heber too, like as like a third, fourth guy to like just make practices run.
Right. I'm curious how things look after spring. Like more power to these guys if they stay and if they want to stay. The math doesn't math for me. Like if you're a Kenny Minchey, unless he goes out and has a great spring. I mean, for all I know, but it's interesting. Like Carr has been billed pretty much as the quarterback of the future. I've never heard a bad word about him. He looked good in the spring game last year, for whatever that's worth. It'll be very interesting. Like, how much better can Steve Angeli get? I don't know. I mean, I think he's very valuable to that room and to this program. Is he going to lead in the playoffs? Playoff spot? Yeah, I think he could. It won't be just him, but I wouldn't look at it as a bad thing if he won the starting job. It's just I can't remember an Notre Dame season. 2016, I guess, would be it where I have this many questions or curiosity about the quarterback room. And even the 2016 one, those were two good players that Brian Kelly just completely screwed up. I mean, let's face it. You look at what they did before then. Malik Zaire and Sean Kaiser.
He could not decide between a guy who was a second-round pick and a guy who was a backup at Florida.
Yeah, if you put it that way, but like Zaire was good when healthy, and I think he had to wait a little too long behind Golson. They didn't pull the plug on that soon enough. He finally got his chance. He gets hurt at the other. Like, it was just like everything that could go wrong externally from a college career standpoint, I think went wrong for him. I always kind of felt bad for him with the way it worked out in that regard. But by the way, Mike Sanford, the OC on that lovely 2016 team, just got a high school. The two coordinators from that 4-8 team and the team the year before are now high school head coaches.
That's true. Yeah. At Valor Christian outside Denver, the alma mater of one Christian McCaffrey. And other McCaffreys as well. But yeah, he's back in the coaching game. It's good.
I always thought that 2015 team, talent for talent, was the best I covered at Notre Dame, and they were 2 points away in 2 games from being in that playoff and having a legit chance at winning a championship. And again, their coordinators are now high school coaches 10 years later. So I think that in some ways, reverse engineering it, that's validating, in my opinion, that team was really good because they got that far. With, I guess, Mike Denbrock was calling the plays that year. We found out after the fact. Brian Kelly wouldn't tell us, but interesting year.
Yeah, good offensive line.
The ACC, if you want to get to this, announced their legal resolutions with Florida State and Clemson this week. They've dropped all litigation against each other. They're, in addition to the Success Initiative plot, where teams that advance in the NCAA tournament and college football playoff will get to keep the money they earn for their conference. There's also going to be money distributed to the highest rated programs among a 5-year rolling basis. The grant of rights has also been dropped to a flat fee of $75 million, or excuse me, the exit fee has been dropped to a flat fee of $75 million 5 years from now in 2030, when Bill Belichick's girlfriend will still be in her 20s. So it's not that far from now. I bring this all up because I think a lot of Notre Dame's independence, because we gotta always talk about this, hinges on the health and volatility of the ACC, which I think in this case opted for certainty and stability in the short term, while opening up a huge question mark for the long term. And I think that's okay, even if there's almost like an expiration date on this thing that's now been written out for everyone to see.
It does feel a little bit like a poison pill that the league swallowed to end the litigation from Florida State and Clemson. And I get it. I don't think that you could continue on a whole lot longer in the like, hey, our biggest members are suing us. Like, that's not a healthy place to be. But I do think, especially the television revenue component of getting paid more if more people watch you. Also, we're going to make sure Notre Dame plays Clemson, Miami, and Florida State more.
Mm-hmm.
That seems that is like a self-fulfilling prophecy of like you're guaranteeing money. You're essentially guaranteeing a automatic bid for Clemson, Florida State, and Miami for conference revenue, regardless of whether they have success or not. And that, I guess, if you're Wake Forest, you're probably like, well, we just want to stay in a major conference. If you're Louisville, you're probably like, wait a minute. If you're Duke or North Carolina, you're like, hold on. So yeah, I don't know.
SMU made the playoff in their first year, and they're not getting.
They don't need money at all.
They're not getting TV revenue until 2033. Literally 3 years after the exit fee drops to $75 million, they will get their full share.
When the ACC no longer exists. It's, I don't know. I don't think anyone knows what college football is going to look, or college sports are going to look like in 5 years. You know, once we hit you wrote about this on the Inside Zone, like once 2030 rolls around, like I think everything's going to be up for grabs. And I do think if Notre Dame ends up joining a conference, the conference is going to look more like the AFC or the NFC, opposed to, we had to join the Big Ten, or, we had to join the SEC. you're going to be paired up with schools that are going for it in, the modern world of college football, opposed to just like linked up with like-minded institutions.
You know who the highest rated TV team was on record this past year from the ACC?
Was it not Florida State?
Nope.
Who was it? Well, it
Georgia
wasn't
Tech.
Clemson.
Georgia Tech.
Oh, okay.
Because they played week 0 against Florida State. They had the Friday game against Georgia that went to like 8 overtimes. They played Notre Dame. And by the way, the ACC network, where most of these games are, is not even Nielsen rated. So I'd love to see how they all get in a room and divvy up those dollars and numbers. But like, nothing against Georgia Tech. They had a fine season, but congrats, Georgia Tech. You played 3 good teams and now you're getting paid. Or I guess 2 good teams. Florida State wasn't good. Like,
no.
It's so backwards and yet so emblematic of everything going on in college sports right now. Again, I'm with you. Like 5 years from now, especially when these TV contracts are up, the Big Ten is up in 2030. College football playoffs a year after that. I think everything's going to be different. I mean, just look at recent history. The SEC added Oklahoma and Texas 3 years before their TV deal was up. I mean, I'll be curious to see what happens to like the bottom of the barrel of these power conferences, but 5-10 years from now, I think it'll be Notre Dame fighting Irish Inc., a subsidy of the University of Notre Dame, against Clemson. And Jack Swarbrick has gone on record with all this in years past, and I think he's absolutely right. Like, that's ultimately going to be what this looks like.
Which he said. I had an interview with him where I remember him like decrying athletic departments as essentially license the university for their color scheme. But unfortunately, there's a lot of schools that are going to end up in that boat down the road. One thing, and I think Ross Dellinger from Yahoo Sports reported this. I don't think I've seen it written definitively elsewhere, but the idea that Notre Dame and Clemson is going to be an every year game.
I saw that too. Yeah,
was news to me. I don't necessarily know if I understand the upside for that for either schools, especially if Clemson still plans to play South Carolina.
I do for Clemson because ratings wise, it's going to help them, which is going to mean
I forgot
money.
about
also, having Notre Dame come to Death Valley every other year is better than. I mean, I imagine they sell out most games, but they're not getting game day unless it's a really good Miami, Florida State, or Notre Dame team. I see the upside. I don't. Did you see Matt Rule with Urban Meyer last week, basically saying like, why would we ever?
Really bad.
I couldn't disagree with that more. And his athletic director, Troy Dannon, they canceled the series with Tennessee a couple weeks ago. And Troy Dannon went out. He said to someone locally there, but I remember reading the tweet, and he was like, I talked to committee members, and they said it won't affect us. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, okay, well, I name names. I mean, you won't, but I don't know if I buy all that. Like, if conference champions are going to get automatic bids, you're going to, and conference schedules are out of your control. See Indiana this year. Like, you're going to need other marks on your resume. And I don't think, I'm not seeing someone hurt by their schedule. Again, we're only talking about 1 year here. You could say Indiana benefited from a weak schedule.
They did drop Louisville, though. Like, to be, they got a weird Big Ten schedule, but they also dropped Louisville as a non-con game.
True. But I'm saying, like, I didn't see anyone lose non-conference. Like, Clemson lost to Georgia like 42-3, and Clemson, well, they won the ACC, but the ACC still got multiple bids. I've not seen someone
Northern Illinois
non-conference game, right?
Yeah, they're all non. Like, Indiana was a great story last year. I hope that the Indiana story doesn't repeat itself from a scheduling point of view. This is where, like, I don't agree with Kirk Herbstreit, but I at least feel like he has a point that let's look at who you played and who you intended to play. If your conference gives you a weird schedule, your conference gives you a weird schedule. If you duck somebody in the non-conference, Nebraska dropping Tennessee.
Right.
What was the other one? Like Ole Miss, Wake Forest, or something.
That got canceled for next year.
Yeah. So if you're Wake Forest or you're Nebraska, like, that should be a stain on your playoff potential. So I hope that is an adjustment that the committee makes, in which case Matt Rule got some really bad advice.
Yeah, I just my thing is that there wasn't like a peer for Indiana. Like, I did not want a 3-loss Alabama team over them, and I don't say it like that they couldn't be better than Indiana, but like Alabama lost to Vanderbilt and got smoked by a terrible Oklahoma team. Like,
right.
I don't.
I think hopefully it was a one-off situation for that part of it too, where you would feel like there was a more deserving other program that could be in the mix there. Last year there wasn't. I was totally fine with Indiana making it. I would just
like 12.
I would love
like,
if Indiana was 11-1, but they beat Louisville, then I'd be like, oh, of course, no problem, awesome season, guys, like go for it. But
I would say that in their defense too, like they beat the hell out of everyone they played for the most part.
That's true too.
And the only 2 games they lost were the 2 teams that played in the championship, which in hindsight is pretty impressive. But 12 is a lot. Like most years, like I think in most 14 playoff years, you couldn't name 4 teams that were legitimately going to win the championship that year. And I know college football is flatter now than it was then, but like you're not going to find 12 teams that can legitimately win the national title this year. You'd be hard pressed to find 8. Now, Ohio State was a very unique case this year where they made the run, but I don't know. I hope why would you play those games? They're great for TV, who's paying you. They're great for fans, who's also paying you. And I honestly think like that's a great equalizer or tiebreaker when you are comparing resumes. If you're looking at 2 teams with the same record or that are 1 game apart, like you won't convince me otherwise.
Yeah, I wouldn't try to. I get it that way. It's and I guess when I say the benefit, or I don't see the benefit for the Clemson Notre Dame series being annual, I think it's maybe more from a variety standpoint if you're Notre Dame and Clemson. And also, like, I do wonder, does that say something or not about the USC series? I don't know. It certainly
Jen Cohen was very non-committal to your colleague Antonio Morales a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I would just if I was Notre Dame, I would make sure I had a backup plan for USC, and Clemson would be a very, very good backup plan. So that's something to consider way down the road. But you're looking for scheduling conspiracy theory.
As long as Chad Bowden's there will be room for USC on Notre Dame's schedule every year. At least there should be.
Oh my gosh.
A reminder to subscribe to us on YouTube and Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Appreciate all the feedback we've gotten from you guys all year long. And if you'd like some independent merch, please go to obviousshirts.com. Quarter zips, hoodies, t-shirts, some of your favorite sayings, some of the podcast favorite sayings. Go on there to Obvious Shirts. I'll spell this out because I keep getting asked how to spell obvious. OBVIOUS shirts.com. Thanks to our partners there for all the great merch.
Yes. Also, thank you to sponsor Roback as the weather turns, allegedly. Your polos, your quarter zips, your joggers, still some great hoodies. They got some new officially licensed Notre Dame apparel. Thanks to Roback for shooting the white Notre Dame hoodie off to me. And you can use the promo code IRISH for 20% off your first order. Go to roback.com, promo code IRISH for 20% off your first order. And also a new sponsor, Couple of Beers, a revolutionary medicine that treats anxiety and depression fast. Within minutes of taking it, you'll be back to your old self. Consult your local physician for more details. Which is a good segue. Matt, will you be attending that show in September?
There's nothing I hate in this world more than country music, but Shane Gillis, whatever he is doing there, might get me to go. It is a college football Saturday. Like, I do want to watch games, even if Notre Dame's not playing. But is that, again, I'm like so out of it with country. Is that a thing now where comedians join country?
That was news to me. But I got into the pre-sale today, so I got my Zack Bryan, Shane Gillis tickets. First, that's the Saturday, the 6th, the 7th.
Jeremy Kennedy as well. I do know all these names, even if I don't listen to them.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it will be fun. I'm a little concerned that my daughter was really interested in going, so she's coming with me, which will be great for Zack Bryan, but maybe not as good for Shane Gillis.
She'll probably surprise you with how much she already knows.
That's possible. But, yeah, no, Notre Dame's, done the Garth Brooks, done the Billy Joel. Like, this feels like a little bit more modern. It's good to have like a little bit more youthful vibe in the stadium. I had heard Zack Bryan for a while. I thought maybe that was not going to happen, but I think it'll be a cool show. And I was told like this show is not the Shane Gillis, how do I help Notre Dame's NIL event. But there may be and probably will be one of those down the road.
That'd be fun. But I think it also obscures the fact that that place has money growing on trees. And
yeah,
they can probably help themselves when it comes to NIL, which I think they are doing, especially as we move into the revenue share era.
I hope he comes out dressed like Alabama Jones.
They have game day spot before they can pregame.
Yeah.
By the way, that's a pretty big. I don't know any football stadiums are doing that in season. Like 7 days later, they're playing Texas A&M on that turf.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. That is a bit of a turnaround there, but I think it'll be a cool show in season. Like people will be dialed into Notre Dame football at that point. Probably 1-0. We'll see after the Miami game, but be a nice debut for Notre Dame, or a nice sort of back open for business for Notre Dame Stadium after a run to the national championship game. Assuming the rest of the offseason goes okay, but we'll have many podcasts to figure out what the heck's going on with Notre Dame football.
It'll be better than last year's home opener, that's for sure.
Yes, it will.
I was going to say 2 quick shout outs. Caleb Davis, we were talking about the personnel department. Looks like he's at San Diego State to be Sean Lewis's general manager. He did a lot of good work in his time at Notre Dame. And friend of the show, even though he's never actually been on it, Nick Lazinski, promoted to co-defense coordinator for our true friend of the show, Clark Lee at Vanderbilt. So shout out to Nick. We knew you when. Cool to see former teammate Zack Martin. It's cool to see him move up in the football world. Not surprised either.
Yeah, I did a feature on him when he was on the staff at The Athletic, which was super fun to write because he was like a super fan. I just want to be at Notre Dame, and then gets to coach there. And yeah, good shout out to him.
Clark Lee told me he hired him at Vanderbilt after reading that story in The Athletic.
Yeah. Which I was a little concerned about because I talked to Clark Lee for the story. So I guess I thought he would have read it while he was at Notre Dame, but I guess not. We'll see. It's good to see. But yeah, shout out Nick. Great guy. Much success in the coaching ranks for him.
Awesome. Well, great to be back with you guys. We'll be back. We'll definitely be back before spring ball kicks off in 13 days here with some other updates. But good to be back. Pete, if you have anything to add? Speak now.
Nothing other than I'm going on vacation next week, so we definitely will not be back for a show next week unless you're going to go solo. We're
going to do your trip.
Didn't get the internet package on the cruise.
Season 4 of The White Lotus, featuring Pete and his family on the Caribbean. Can't wait to break it down next week. Hope he's not the one who gets murdered.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Matt. All right.
On that note.
That's as good a place to end as any for this episode of The Independent. Thanks for everyone for being with us. You can follow us on YouTube. Obviously, you can get this podcast wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple, all that good stuff. So until our next episode, he's Matt. I'm Pete. Thanks for being with us on the latest episode of The Independent.